Washington, D.C. was bathed in the golden light of early fall. The Potomac River glistened beneath the sun, while the city's skyscrapers stood tall, symbolizing the power and influence that thrived within its borders. The sound of the city was always the same, a hum of ambition, a cacophony of decisions being made at every corner. Emma Winters stepped into the sleek, glass lobby of Aurora Media, a prominent media and communications company. It was another day at work, but today felt different. She was preparing for an important meeting, one that could alter the trajectory of her career. As the chief financial officer of Aurora, Emma knew how much was riding on this partnership with Carter Enterprises, one of the most powerful tech and media firms in the nation. Her palms were slightly sweaty as she adjusted her blazer and straightened her posture. She wasn't one to get nervous, but the man she was about to meet wasn't someone she had to impress. He was someone she needed to watch out for. Ethan Carter. The CEO of Carter Enterprises was a name whispered in both admiration and fear throughout the business world. Known for his sharp mind, ruthless approach, and private nature, Ethan was a man who didn't tolerate mistakes. He was a force to be reckoned with. And today, he would be the one deciding whether this partnership would succeed or fail. Emma took a deep breath and entered the conference room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city skyline. It was a place of power, a place where deals were made, and Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of the occasion. As she walked toward the large oval table, she noticed Ethan sitting at the far end, his back straight, his hands clasped in front of him. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, Emma felt like she was being scrutinized by someone who could read her every thought. He wasn't looking at her, but she could feel his gaze on her as she sat down. There was something about him, a presence, a cold intensity that made it impossible to ignore him. His dark hair was neatly styled, his suit impeccably tailored. His eyes, a stormy grey, held a depth that hinted at a mind constantly working. Calculating, Miss Winters, he finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of authority in it. I trust you're well prepared for today. I am, Mr. Carter, Emma replied, her voice steady. She knew she had to be confident in this moment. We've reviewed all the financials, and I believe this partnership will be mutually beneficial for both of our companies. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm sure you do. But numbers are just numbers, Miss Winters. The real question is whether your company can handle the responsibility of working with ours. Emma's pulse quickened, but she didn't show it. She had anticipated this line of questioning. Aurora has been growing rapidly, and we've secured substantial investments in the past year. We have the resources, the team, and the vision to make this collaboration a success. Ethan nodded slowly, his lips curling into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Confidence is important, but it's not enough. You're about to be tied to a company that has seen both great success and great failure. Can your team handle the pressure? For a moment, Emma hesitated. The weight of his words sank in, but she didn't falter. We've weathered challenges before, Mr. Carter, and we've come out stronger every time. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the surface of the table. We'll see, Miss Winters. We'll see. The rest of the meeting proceeded with more technical discussions about the terms of the partnership, the financial projections, and the future vision. Ethan's questions were sharp, pointed, and often made Emma feel like she was being tested, not just on the numbers, but on her ability to think under pressure. and every time he spoke, Emma couldn't help but notice the way he seemed to watch her, not just with his eyes, but with his mind, calculating her every move. She had dealt with difficult clients before, but there was something about Ethan that made him different. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist, a chess player. As the meeting ended and everyone began to gather their things, Emma found herself caught off guard when Ethan stood and walked toward her. He extended his hand, his grip firm but not overpowering. "I look forward to seeing how this partnership develops, Miss Winters," he said, his voice low and steady. "I have no patience for failure." "Neither do I, Mr. Carter," Emma replied, shaking his hand. Her mind raced, but she kept her composure. As she walked out of the room, her heart was still pounding. She had been prepared for a business negotiation, but what she had just experienced was far more than that. Ethan Carter wasn't just a businessman, he was a man with a purpose. And she had no idea what kind of game she had just been pulled into. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered, "It's only just begun." After the meeting with Ethan Carter, Emma Winters couldn't shake the unease that lingered in her mind. He had been calculating, cold, and yet there was something more, something beneath the surface she couldn't quite place. She had handled difficult meetings before, but this one felt different. Ethan's every word, every question, felt like a test. But what was he really looking for? As the days passed, Emma tried to focus on her work, keeping her eyes on the numbers and the reports that would help ensure the partnership between Aurora Media and Carter Enterprises succeeded. But the thought of Ethan kept gnawing at her, especially after their brief handshake and the cryptic words he had left her with. "I have no patience for failure." She hadn't been able to shake off the feeling that there was more to his words than just business. There was something personal, there's something buried in his past. Determined to understand him better, Emma turned to the one thing she knew she could control: research. She sat down at her desk late one evening, the office quiet around her, and began digging. The first search she did was on Carter Enterprises. Everything about the company was in the public domain. Of course, their financials, press releases, and annual reports were readily available. But Emma wasn't looking for the obvious. She was looking for something deeper. Her fingers typed quickly as she pulled up articles from years ago. She knew Ethan had taken over Carter Enterprises after his father's sudden death. But there were gaps in the narrative, things people didn't talk about. The media had always painted a picture of him as the son who came in, saved the company, and became a business genius. But it didn't add up. Then she found it, a small, buried article dated 10 years ago, before Ethan had fully taken control. The headline read, "Carter Enterprises faces collapse amidst financial scandal." Her heart skipped a beat as she clicked on it. The article was vague, detailing how the company had faced serious financial setbacks. But it mentioned a mysterious figure behind the scenes who was said to be responsible for the mess. Ethan's father had been publicly blamed for the scandal, but the piece hinted that the real culprit might have been someone close to the familiar business partner or an insider. The more Emma read, the more the pieces started to fit together. Ethan's father had been involved in something far more complex than a simple business failure. The article mentioned offshore accounts, unreported debt, and a silent partner who had helped to cover up the company's problems, someone who had manipulated the financial system from within. Emma couldn't help but think of Ethan. Could he have been involved in these financial schemes, even as a young man? Was his rise to power not just a result of hard work and business acumen, but also of secrets he was hiding? But there was something else in the article that caught her attention, a name that sent a chill through her spine. Min Tuan. The article mentioned that Min Tuan was believed to be the person who had helped Ethan's father hide the company's true financial state. Could this be the same Min Tuan, the CEO of Carter Enterprises, that she had just met? Suddenly, Emma felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had always known Ethan's company had a dark past, but now she wondered just how much of that darkness had to do with him. She couldn't stop herself now. Emma spent the next few hours digging deeper, finding more old articles, interviews, and financial records, each one shedding more light on the tangled web of lies surrounding Carter Enterprises. Ethan's past was murky, his family, his company, and even his motivations all seemed to blur together into something she didn't fully understand. She took notes, organized her thoughts, and prepared herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. The next morning, Emma arrived early at the office. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let this go any longer. She needed answers, and she wasn't afraid to ask for them. She had a meeting scheduled with Ethan at 2 p.m., and she knew exactly what she was going to say. When she entered Ethan's office, he was sitting behind his massive desk, looking over some papers. As usual, he looked effortlessly in control. But Emma noticed the slightest flicker of tension in his jaw when she entered. "Miss Winters," he greeted her, his voice smooth. "You're early. I was just about to call for you." "I'm sure you were," Emma said, her tone even but with an edge of resolve. She took a seat across from him, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk about Carter Enterprises." Ethan's expression shifted, but only slightly. He didn't flinch, but there was a brief pause before he responded. "What about it?" "I did some digging," she said, her gaze unwavering, "and I found some things. Some things about your father, about the company, and about you." Ethan's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Is that so?" "I know you've been hiding something, Ethan. I know about the financial scandal, about the debts, about the offshore accounts. And I know that you weren't just an innocent bystander in all of this. You were involved." For the first time, Ethan's mask cracked. His eyes flashed, and his voice grew tight. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think I do," Emma replied calmly. "And I think you're afraid that if I find out everything, it will destroy everything you've built." Ethan leaned forward, his fingers clenching the edge of his desk. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You don't understand the pressure, the choices I had to make. My father's death, his mistakes, they were my burden to carry. And now you want to use it against me." Emma's chest tightened, but she didn't back down. "I'm not trying to use anything against you. I'm trying to understand you. I need to know why you've kept all this from me, and why you think I can trust you when you've been lying to me from the start." Ethan's gaze softened for a moment, but the tension remained thick. "I never wanted you involved in this, Emma. But now that you're here, you deserve the truth. I'll tell you everything. But understand this, it's not as simple as you think. There are things in motion that neither of us can control." Emma didn't know whether to trust him or walk away. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just about business anymore. Ethan Carter wasn't the man she had thought him to be. And as much as she wanted to believe in him, the deeper she dug, the darker the secrets became. The silence in Ethan's office was deafening. The tension between him and Emma Winters was palpable, thicker than the glass walls that separated them from the rest of the world. He sat behind his polished desk, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Emma was the first to break the silence. "I need answers, Ethan. I can't keep going without knowing the truth. About the scandal, about your father, and about you." Ethan sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly, as if the weight of the world had suddenly settled back on him. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare crack in his usual composed demeanor. For a moment, he looked tired, vulnerable, but it was only for a moment. "All right," he said finally, his voice low, like the calm before a storm. "I'll tell you. But you need to understand, Emma, this is not something I'm proud of." He leaned forward, his gaze intense, as if weighing whether to share the deepest parts of himself. Emma braced herself, knowing that the man sitting in front of her wasn't the one she had originally thought. "My father, Richard Carter," Ethan began, his voice steady but carrying an underlying bitterness. "He built Carter Enterprises from the ground up. But the truth is, he made deals with people who were willing to go to extremes to make money. When the market collapsed, we found ourselves in a mess that no one could have predicted." Emma listened carefully, her heart racing. She had heard pieces of this story before, but never this raw, never this honest. "Everything fell apart, and my father—" Ethan paused, struggling with the next words. "He was accused of fraud, of hiding the true financial situation. The company was bleeding money. But what no one knew was that it wasn't just his fault. There were other players involved, and I, as his son, had to clean up the mess." Emma's mind raced. She could see the pain in Ethan's eyes as he spoke about his father, the man who had built an empire only to watch it crumble. But it wasn't just his father's mistakes. Ethan had been involved, too. She needed to know how. "But you didn't just step in and try to fix things, did you?" she asked carefully, her voice laced with skepticism. "You took control. You manipulated the numbers, the investments. You made deals that got you to the top." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I did what I had to do to save the company. I did what no one else could do. My father wasn't capable of running Carter Enterprises anymore. He'd lost it all, his integrity, his reputation. So I took over." Emma's eyes softened for a brief moment. She understood the pressure Ethan must have felt, the responsibility of keeping the empire intact. But there was still one question that lingered in her mind. "And Mintuan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's his role in all of this?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "Mintuan was my father's right-hand man. He was the one who helped him navigate the shady deals, the backdoor agreements that kept Carter Enterprises afloat for years. When my father died, Min Tuan became the one person I could trust. Or so I thought. Did Min Tuan know what was going on?" Emma pressed, feeling a deep pit form in her stomach. "Did he help cover up the truth?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "He was involved in the cover-up, in trying to protect my father's legacy. But Min Tuan wasn't just doing it for my father's sake. He had his own agenda, and when I took control, he started to push for his own interests. That's when things got complicated." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Min Tuan, the man she had been working with, the man who had been nothing but professional with her, he had been part of the web of lies and deception all along. And Ethan, despite his seemingly good intentions, had been entangled in it too. "So you've been living with this secret for years," Emma said, her voice cold. "And now you want me to believe that you've changed?" That you're not like him? Ethan stood up and walked toward the window, his back to her. He stared out over the city as if searching for something. When he finally spoke, his voice was tinged with regret. I didn't want to be like my father. I didn't want to inherit his mistakes. But I did. And when I took over Carter Enterprises, I made decisions that hurt people. People like you. Emma felt the sting of his words. She had been a pawn in his game, a piece to be moved around without ever knowing the full truth. She had trusted him, believing he was a man of integrity, but now she wasn't so sure. You used me, she whispered, more to herself than to him. You manipulated me just like your father manipulated everyone else. Ethan turned to face her, his expression pained. I didn't want to use you, Emma. I wanted to protect you. But I couldn't let go of the past, of the legacy that was dragging me down. I thought if I could control everything, if I could control you, I could fix it. Fix what? She asked, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. Fix the company. Fix your reputation. Or fix your broken relationship with your father. Ethan's silence was his answer. Emma shook her head, unable to believe what she was hearing. I can't be part of this anymore. I can't work with someone who's built their entire life on lies and manipulation. She stood up and walked toward the door, her heart pounding. She knew it was over. Ethan's secrets, his lies, they were too much for her to handle. Just before she left the room, she turned back. I hope one day you can fix yourself, Ethan, but I won't be here to see it. She left the office, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. But deep down, she knew she couldn't stay in this world of secrets. Not when everything she had believed in had been a lie. The days following her confrontation with Ethan Carter had felt like an eternity. Emma had thrown herself into her work at Aurora Media, burying the turmoil in her heart beneath spreadsheets and board meetings. The partnership between Aurora and Carter Enterprises was still in full swing. But for the first time since she had joined Aurora, Emma felt as though she were walking on a tightrope, with no safety net beneath her. The truth she had uncovered about Ethan, his involvement in the financial scandal, his manipulation of everyone around him, including herself, had shattered the trust she'd placed in him. She hadn't been able to sleep, hadn't been able to think about anything but him, and more importantly, the lies that had changed the course of her career. And yet, despite everything, there was still a part of her that couldn't quite let go. Ethan had admitted his mistakes. He had confessed that he used her, protected her, out of some misguided sense of duty, but he had still used her. But those words, as painful as they were, didn't erase the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of his past. The regret, the burden he carried, was all too real. But was it enough? Could it be enough to undo everything he had done? As Emma sat in her office that day, reviewing the latest financial reports for a critical meeting, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach flip. Ethan Carter. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the screen. The temptation to ignore the call was strong, but something in her gut told her she needed to hear what he had to say. With a deep breath, she answered. Emma, his voice came through the phone, strained and urgent. I need to talk to you. About what? She replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. I made a mistake, Ethan said, his tone raw. I know I've hurt you, and I can't undo that. But I can't just let things end this way. I can't live with the guilt of what I've done, not to you, not to anyone. Emma closed her eyes. His words were like a double-edged sword, pulling at the emotions she had tried so hard to suppress. He had said these things before, hadn't he? But this time, there was something different in his voice. The desperation, the rawness, was real. "I don't know what you want from me, Ethan," Emma said quietly. "You've made your choices. You've lied to me, manipulated me, and now you want me to just forget everything and forgive you." There was a long pause on the other end. Ethan's voice softened. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Not yet, anyway. But I want to show you that I'm changing, that I'm not the same man I was before. Please, just give me a chance to prove it." Her heart pounded in her chest. "How can I believe you? How can I trust you again after everything you've done?" "I don't know," Ethan replied. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I'm stepping away from Carter Enterprises, Emma. I'm not walking away from the business, but I'm taking a step back. The power, the control, it's never been what mattered. What matters is fixing the damage I've done, and that starts with you. Please." Emma's breath caught in her throat. He was stepping away. Ethan, the man who had spent years clawing his way to the top, was willing to walk away from everything for her. The idea felt impossible. "What's your game, Ethan?" she asked, her voice shaking despite herself. "What's the catch? You can't just undo everything with a few words." "I know," he said quietly, "but I'm not asking for your forgiveness just yet. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be better, not just for you, but for myself. I'll leave Carter Enterprises behind, step away from the business, and I'll find a way to make things right." For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. She had never seen him this vulnerable before. The man who had been ruthless, calculating, and emotionally distant was now standing before her, offering everything he had left. And yet, in that moment, she realized something. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness because he thought it would make him feel better. He was asking for it because he knew it was the only way he could truly heal. Her mind raced. Was this the man she could trust again? Or was she about to make another mistake? "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I do know one thing: you've changed. I can see it. I can feel it. But you have to prove it, Ethan. Not just with words, but with actions." "I will," he replied softly. "And I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." The line went silent for a moment. Then Ethan spoke again. "Will you meet me, Emma? Just once. I promise you, no games, no manipulation, just a chance for us to talk." She hesitated, her fingers trembling against the phone. This wasn't easy. Nothing about this situation was easy. But somehow, despite the pain, despite the lies, Emma knew that there was something real between them. She could feel it in her chest, a pull she couldn't deny. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "One last time. But this is it, Ethan. You prove yourself to me, or it's over. No more chances." "I understand," he said, the relief in his voice clear. "I'll be there. I won't disappoint you." As she hung up the phone, Emma exhaled slowly. Her emotions were still a whirlwind, but something inside her had shifted. Maybe it was the hope that Ethan really had changed. Maybe it was the realization that the truth, however painful, was finally out in the open. But one thing was certain: this wasn't over yet. The next few days felt like a blur. Ethan Carter spent every waking hour working to repair the damage he had caused, not just to his company, but to the woman he had hurt most. He had called in a meeting with the board members of Carter Enterprises. informing them of his decision to step down as CEO. The room had been filled with shock and disbelief. Ethan had always been the one to hold the reins, the one who made the tough decisions. And now he was giving it all up. "You're making a huge mistake," Ethan, one of the senior members, Henry Miller, had said. "Carter Enterprises is your legacy. You can't just walk away from it." Ethan had looked Henry in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "My legacy isn't this company anymore. It's about becoming the man I should have been all along. And that means stepping down, letting someone else take the lead." The board had protested, but Ethan's decision was final. He had already made arrangements for a smooth transition of leadership, and now all he had to do was prove that he was serious about changing. Prove it to Emma and to himself. For the first time in a long while, Emma Winters allowed herself to relax. The walls she had built around herself over the past few weeks began to crumble, piece by piece. She had agreed to meet Ethan again, but this time it was different. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for, whether she could forgive him, or whether she was simply testing him to see if he could truly change. When she walked into the small cafe where they had agreed to meet, Ethan was already sitting at a corner table, his usual cold expression softened by a touch of vulnerability. His suit was gone, replaced by a simple navy jacket and a white shirt. He looked different, not just in appearance, but in the way he carried himself. There was a weariness in his eyes, a quiet self-awareness that hadn't been there before. As she approached, he stood up. "Emma," he said, his voice steady, though the tension between them was palpable. "Thank you for coming." Emma nodded but didn't immediately sit down. "Let's get this over with," she said, her voice more guarded than she intended. "You've said all the right things so far, Ethan, but words are easy. You need to show me that you mean it." "I understand," Ethan replied, his gaze intense. "And I will. Everything I've done up until now was driven by fear of failing, fear of being seen as weak. But I know now that real strength comes from honesty, from facing the truth, no matter how painful it is." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I've made mistakes, Emma. I know that. But I'm here, trying to be the man I should have been all along. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can change, to prove that I'm not just the man I was." Yesterday, Emma took a deep breath. She had heard this before, and yet, this time, there was something different in his eyes. Something genuine. She could feel it, his remorse, his determination. "All right," she said, finally sitting down. "Show me, then. Show me that you can change. And show me that you're not just doing this because you think it's what I want." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "I'm done with manipulation, Emma. No more games. No more lies. I've already taken the first step by stepping down as CEO. Now I'm putting my trust in you. I want you to help me rebuild Carter Enterprises, but this time it will be based on transparency, integrity, and fairness." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You want my help?" "I do," he said, his voice low. "I need someone who will hold me accountable. Someone who isn't afraid to call me out when I make a mistake. And someone who isn't afraid to fight for what's right." Her mind raced. She wasn't sure if this was just another attempt to win her back, or if he was truly serious about changing. But a small part of her, maybe the part she had tried to suppress, wanted to believe him. "I'll help you," Emma said quietly. "But this won't be easy. There are people in your company who won't accept this change. And there are people who will try to undermine us. You'll have to face them. Ethan looked at her, his expression hardening with resolve. I'm ready. I've already made my peace with the fact that not everyone will like what I'm doing. But I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Ethan's words lingered, and Emma couldn't help but feel the shift in their dynamic. The man sitting across from her wasn't the same man she had met weeks ago. He was still powerful, still commanding, but there was something more: humility, vulnerability, and most importantly, honesty. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, restructuring plans, and difficult conversations. Ethan had kept his promise to step down from his position as CEO of Carter Enterprises, handing over the reins to a trusted colleague. But that wasn't enough. He knew the true test was what happened next. He and Emma worked side by side, making sure that the company would operate with transparency and accountability. They had to rebuild from the ground up, restoring the trust that had been broken. But Ethan was determined to do whatever it took to make things right. One day, as they sat in the conference room reviewing the next phase of the company's transition, Ethan turned to Emma. I can't do this without you. Emma, I know I've made mistakes, but this feels right. I can't keep running away from what I've done. I need you by my side. Emma looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had come a long way since their first meeting, and while she still wasn't sure if she could fully trust him, there was something about his resolve that made her want to believe in him. I'll be here, she said softly, but you need to prove that this isn't just another one of your power plays. You need to show me that this is real, that we can make this work together. Ethan nodded, determination in his eyes. I will, I promise you, Emma. This is real. The first few days of their partnership felt almost like a dream. Emma Winters and Ethan Carter worked closely together, restructuring Carter Enterprises with an unwavering commitment to transparency and integrity. But the reality of their situation was starting to set in. There were still obstacles. Many of them manned the weight of Ethan's past, loomed over them like a dark cloud, threatening to undo everything they had worked for. The board of Carter Enterprises wasn't thrilled with Ethan's decision to step down as CEO. They were loyal to him, sure, but they didn't understand the fundamental shift he was trying to make. The corporate culture he had built had been one of power, secrecy, and control, and it was not easy to dismantle. As Emma sat in the conference room, reviewing the latest proposal for restructuring, she felt the familiar weight of doubt creeping in. It had been weeks since Ethan had taken the first step toward redemption, and while she had seen his sincerity, she still wasn't sure if they could pull this off. Could they really change the entire company culture, or was Ethan's past too deeply ingrained for them to succeed? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She looked up to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his expression serious. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Emma raised an eyebrow, but gestured for him to enter. About what? About what's coming next, Ethan replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. I've received word that a few keyboard members are planning to make a move against the changes we've been pushing for. Emma frowned. I thought they agreed to the restructuring. They did, Ethan said, pacing the room. But some of them don't like the direction I'm taking. They don't like the transparency, the honesty, the idea that the company might actually be run with some level of integrity. They want to go back to the way things were, powerful, ruthless, and profitable at any cost. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that Ethan's vision for the future of Carter Enterprises was a radical shift, and it would not be easy to convince everyone to follow him. But she also knew that if they didn't succeed, everything they had worked for would be in vain. "Do you have any idea who's behind this?" she asked. Ethan stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and determination. "I think it's Richard Holloway. He's one of the old guard on the board, someone my father trusted. Holloway's always been about maintaining control, about keeping things the way they've always been. If he has his way, everything we've done so far will be undone." Emma nodded slowly. Richard Holloway was a name she recognized. He had been one of the founding members of Carter Enterprises and had been loyal to the family for years. But loyalty to the family did not necessarily mean loyalty to Ethan. She could see how someone like Holloway might feel threatened by the changes Ethan was trying to make. "We need to act fast," Ethan said, his voice firm. "If we don't make our move now, we'll lose everything. This isn't just about the company anymore, Emma. It's about proving that what I'm doing is right." "I agree," she said, standing up. "But we can't just rely on boardroom politics. We need to take this to the employees, the people who will actually make the changes happen. If they know what's at stake, they'll be on our side." Ethan looked at her with a mixture of surprise and respect. "I wasn't planning on going that route. But you're right. The employees need to understand why this is important. If they don't buy into the new vision, we'll have nothing." The following day, Ethan and Emma called an emergency town hall meeting for all Carter Enterprises employees. It was a bold move, and one that carried significant risk. The company had always been top-down, with decisions made by the few, not the many. But Ethan was determined to show that he wasn't just talking about change, he was going to live it. The room was filled with anxious faces as employees from various departments filed into the large conference hall. Ethan stood at the front of the room, Emma by his side. His usual icy demeanor was replaced with something softer, but still full of authority. "Thank you all for coming at such short notice," he began, his voice steady. "As many of you know, there have been changes happening within the company. I've stepped down as CEO, and we're restructuring to focus on transparency and integrity. These changes aren't just for the company, they're for all of us." There was a murmur in the crowd, and Emma could see some employees exchanging uncertain glances. Ethan's words were bold, but the room was filled with skepticism. "We've made mistakes," Ethan continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I've made mistakes, and I've hurt people along the way. But I'm here today to tell you that we're changing. We're building a future where honesty and fairness matter more than profits. Where you, the employees, are at the center of what we do. And I'm asking you to stand with me as we rebuild this company together." Emma watched as the room fell into silence. She could feel the weight of Ethan's words hanging in the air. This was the moment that would define everything. Would the employees believe in him, or would they see him as just another man making promises he couldn't keep? After a long pause, one of the employees stood up. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice hesitant, "how can we trust that this isn't just another power play? How can we be sure this time will be different?" Ethan met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I can't promise that everything will be easy. I can't promise that there won't be challenges ahead. But I can promise you this I will never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. I will lead by example, and I will fight for you every step of the way." The room was still, and then, slowly, a few employees began to nod. Another one spoke up, this time with more conviction. "We're with you, Mr. Carter." A ripple of agreement spread through the crowd. One by one, more voices rose in support. Ethan had done it. He had taken the first step toward rebuilding the company, and now, it seemed, he was starting to rebuild the trust of those who mattered most. As the town hall concluded, Ethan and Emma stood at the back of the room, watching as employees filed out. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. "You did it," Emma said, her voice softer than it had been in days. "You're starting to get through to them." Ethan looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. "This is just the beginning. There's still a long road ahead, but at least now we have a chance." Emma nodded, feeling a flicker of hope rise within her. For the first time, she believed Ethan when he said that he was changing, but she also knew that the real test had just begun. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and there were still many obstacles in their way. But for now, they had each other, and that was a start. It was a cold Monday morning when Emma Winters walked into the office, her mind racing with the events of the past few days. The town hall had been a success, but there were still rumors that things were about to get much worse. Richard Holloway, the senior board member who had long been loyal to Ethan's father, had made it clear that he didn't approve of the changes Ethan was trying to implement. And the fact that Ethan had given up his position as CEO only fueled the fire. Emma knew that things had escalated beyond boardroom discussions. There was no turning back now. Holloway wasn't just going to let go of his power. He would fight to keep it, no matter what. As she walked into her office, she saw the messages piling up of mails, phone calls, and memos. But one stood out among them all. A meeting request from Richard Holloway. The subject line read, "Urgent Carter Enterprises discussion." Emma knew that the stakes were high. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Later that day, Ethan called her into his office. His face was grim, his jaw clenched. She had never seen him this serious, and for the first time, the weight of his decision to step down as CEO seemed to truly hit him. "What's going on?" Emma asked, trying to read his expression. "It's Holloway," Ethan said, his voice heavy with frustration. "I've just received word that he's planning a motion to have me permanently removed from the company. He's been rallying the board behind my back." Emma's heart sank. "But you've already stepped down. What more does he want?" "He doesn't want change, Emma. He wants control," Ethan replied. "And he knows that if I'm not in charge, he can't manipulate the company the way he used to. This isn't just about myths about whether Carter Enterprises will ever change. He's willing to do whatever it takes to bring me down." Emma frowned, her mind working quickly. "Then we need to act fast. We can't let him get away with this. We have the support of the employees now, but we need the board on our side, too." Ethan nodded, but the worry in his eyes didn't fade. "Holloway has too many allies. He's been ingrained in the company's foundation for years. It's going to take more than just a few allies to change this." "Then we fight back," Emma said, determination rising in her voice. "We can't let him destroy everything we've worked for." Ethan met her gaze, his expression softening slightly. "You're right. But this isn't just about the company anymore. I won't let Holloway or anyone else use this company as a weapon against you." Emma's heart raced, her pulse quickening at his words. He was no longer just a businessman to her. He was someone who was willing to sacrifice everything to protect what they were building together. The meeting was set for the following day. Emma and Ethan arrived at Carter Enterprises headquarters early, both of them knowing that the battle they were about to face was far from over. The boardroom was cold and intimidating. The long tables surrounded by powerful figures who had known Ethan's father, many of them who had supported Richard Holloway's vision of how things should be run. Holloway stood at the head of the table, his expression smug as he saw Ethan and Emma enter. "Ah, Mr. Carter. Miss Winters," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I hope you're ready to face the consequences of your decisions." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stood tall. "I'm ready, Holloway. I've been ready for this moment." "It's time for change," Holloway sneered. "Change? You think you can come in here and turn everything upside down? You've lost the support of the board, and you've lost the support of your company. You're nothing more than a puppet, Ethan, and you're too weak to lead." Emma stepped forward, her voice steady. "You've been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes for far too long, Holloway. But it's over. Ethan's vision for this company is what matters now. Not your outdated tactics, not your control. It's time to move forward." The board members exchanged glances, the tension in the room palpable. Holloway's face twisted with anger. "You think the employees will side with you? You think the board will just let you take control without a fight? You're a fool, Miss Winters." Emma's gaze never wavered. "No, you're the fool, Holloway, because we have the truth on our side. And you know as well as I do that the truth will always win." There was a moment of silence as the board members looked around the room, unsure of where to stand. Ethan's decision to step down had left a power vacuum, and Holloway was trying to fill it with his manipulative tactics. But Emma could feel the shift. The board was beginning to listen, to realize that change wasn't just possible. It was necessary. Then, one by one, a few of the board members began to speak up. "Maybe it's time for a change," one of the older members said, his voice reluctant but firm. "We've been stuck in the past for too long." "I agree," another chimed in. "Ethan's vision is what this company needs to move forward. We can't afford to cling to the old ways any longer." The momentum was building, and Holloway could feel it slipping from his fingers. "You're all making a huge mistake," he spat. "You'll regret this." "I think it's you who's made the mistake, Holloway," Ethan said, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "The time for control and manipulation is over. The people who are really in charge here are the ones who are willing to lead with integrity." The board voted, and to Ethan's relief, the majority sided with him. Holloway's motion to take back control was defeated. He stood, fuming, as the results were announced, his face contorted with anger and disbelief. "You may have won this battle, Carter," he snarled, "but I promise you I'll be back. And next time, you won't be so lucky." As Holloway stormed out of the room, Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. They had fought back against the forces that wanted to keep the company stuck in the past. Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. "We did it," he said quietly. Emma nodded, but there was still something in her heart that wasn't quite at ease. The battle with Holloway was over, but the war for Carter Enterprises and for their future was far from won. The days after the showdown with Richard Holloway had been a whirlwind of decisions and adjustments. Ethan and Emma had successfully managed to hold the line. Carter Enterprises was on a new path, but that path was far from clear. The battle with Holloway had given them the temporary victory, but the real challenge lay ahead, rebuilding the company from the inside out, and more importantly, earning the trust of the board, the employees, and each other. Emma had been working round the clock, reviewing contracts, ensuring the smooth transition of leadership, and dealing with the aftermath of the internal conflict. She had become the backbone of the new direction for Carter Enterprises, and yet the toll it was taking on her was beginning to show. Long hours, stressful meetings, and the weight of the company's future on her shoulders. There were days when she felt like she was losing herself. But today was different. Today, she was taking a step forward. It wasn't just about Carter Enterprises anymore, it was about her and Ethan. And in that moment, as she stepped into the office, she realized that the walls she had built up were beginning to crumble. Slowly but surely, she was letting herself believe in him again. Not just as a CEO, but as the man who was trying to change, who was trying to make things right. Ethan was already at his desk when she walked into his office. His brows furrowed as he scanned through a set of financial reports. He looked up as she entered, his usual cold demeanor softened by the exhaustion in his eyes. His suit was slightly rumpled, as though he hadn't taken time to care about the little things. But to Emma, that signified something. Ethan wasn't just playing the role of the powerful CEO anymore. He was tired, just like her, tired of running, tired of pretending to be invincible. "Emma," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I've been thinking a lot about everything about us, about the company, about the direction we're headed." Emma nodded, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorframe. "What's on your mind?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the window overlooking the city. "I've been so focused on rebuilding Carter Enterprises that I haven't taken the time to focus on what matters, on us. I've made decisions that hurt you, and I don't think I've ever properly apologized for that." Emma felt her heart clench, a tangle of emotions rising inside her. She had heard him apologize before, but there was something different in his voice this time. Something genuine. "You don't have to keep apologizing, Ethan," she said softly, walking over to his desk. "I need to see actions, not just words." "I know," he replied, his voice low. "I've spent my whole life chasing power, trying to make sure I never lost control again. But the truth is, I've been out of control the whole time. And now I want to do things differently. Not just with the company, but with you." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. Emma wasn't sure where this was heading, but she knew one thing for certain, as Nathan wasn't the same man he had been when they first met. He stood up, walking around the desk toward her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight, Emma. I'm asking for the chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve. The man who can stand beside you, not above you." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. This wasn't the man who had used her. This wasn't the man who had lied and manipulated his way to the top. This was someone else, someone real. "I'm not sure I can trust you yet," Emma said, her voice trembling. "But I do know that I want to believe in what we have. Not just for the company, but for us." "For me," Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand. The contact was electric, sending a ripple through her body. He looked down at their hands for a moment before meeting her gaze once more. "Then let me prove it, Emma. Let me show you that I'm not the man I was. Let me show you that I can change, that I can be better for you." The sincerity in his eyes made Emma's heart race. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man standing before her was capable of change, that he was truly the man she had seen glimpses of over the past few weeks, the man who was vulnerable, who was willing to risk everything for the future. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Okay, but you have to show me, Ethan. No more lies. No more secrets. I won't, Ethan promised. I'm done with that. I'll prove it to you, every day. They stood there in the silence, their hands still clasped together. For the first time in a long time, both of them felt a sense of peace, a sense of hope for what the future could hold. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, obstacles, and enemies. But they were in this together. The days that followed felt like a new beginning. Carter Enterprises continued its restructuring, but this time with a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan and Emma worked side by side, making tough decisions about the company's future and their own. The employees began to buy into the vision of transparency and fairness that they were building. And the old guard within the company started to realize that things were changing whether they liked it or not. Ethan had promised to step away from the power plays, and while he was still actively involved in the company, he made it clear that his focus was now on rebuilding, not controlling. He and Emma were a team united in their goals, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he was making decisions not for power, but for what was right. One evening, as they sat together in the conference room reviewing progress reports, Emma looked up from her papers and smiled softly. "You're doing it, Ethan. You're actually doing it." Ethan paused and looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'm just getting started." They shared a quiet moment, both of them knowing that the path ahead would still be challenging, but that they could face it together. For the first time, Emma believed in the possibility of a future where they weren't just business partners, but something more. She didn't know what it would look like yet, but for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope, and that, she realized, was the first step toward a new beginning. The tension in Carter Enterprises was palpable. Despite the early victories and the progress they had made, Ethan and Emma both knew that the real test was coming. The company had started to turn a corner under Ethan's leadership, but there were still those within the organization who would stop at nothing to see him fail. And, to make matters worse, Richard Holloway had already begun his final assault this time, not just on Ethan's position, but on the very foundation of everything they had worked for. It was a Friday afternoon when Emma received the call. She had been in a meeting with her financial team, going over projections and preparing for another round of restructuring. The line between business and personal had blurred for Emma over the last few weeks, but today, the weight of their success was beginning to sink in as she stepped out of the conference room to take the call. She saw Ethan standing at the edge of his office, his arms crossed, staring out over the city skyline. She couldn't help but notice how weary he looked. They had been pushing hard to stabilize Carter Enterprises, but the constant battles with the board members, the scrutiny from the press, and the relentless pressure from their competitors were starting to take its toll. Emma answered the phone, trying to shake off the anxiety she could already feel building. It was an unknown number. "Hello." She answered. "Miss Winters," the voice on the other end said, smooth and insidious. "I think you and Mr. Carter have made a grave mistake." It was Richard Holloway. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What is this about, Holloway?" "I think you know exactly what this is about," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You and Carter have been making waves, thinking that you can change things, but you've underestimated me. You've underestimated the power I still hold in this company." Emma's stomach clenched. She could hear the threat in his voice. But there was something else too, something more dangerous. "We're not afraid of you. "Holloway," she said, keeping her voice steady. "You've lost. It's over." "No, Miss Winters," he said, almost mockingly. "It's far from over. You're making a big mistake, and I plan to make sure you both pay for it." The line went dead, and Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Holloway wasn't just trying to take back control. He was planning something much worse. Something that would force Ethan and her to fight harder than ever before. That evening, as they sat across from each other in Ethan's office, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something dangerous. Ethan's face was as serious as she had ever seen it. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced with the sharp edge of a man who knew that the stakes were higher than ever. "I just got a call from Holloway," Emma said, her voice tight with concern. "He's making his move, Ethan. This time, he's not just attacking your position. He's going after the company. He's using everything he can to bring us down." Ethan's eyes hardened as he sat up straighter in his chair. "What do you mean? What's his plan?" "I don't know yet," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "But he's not giving up. We've made too many enemies, and Holloway is the one who can bring everything crashing down. He knows the right people to target. He knows how to manipulate the system." Ethan clenched his fists, his jaw tight with anger. "I should have seen this coming. Holloway's not the kind of man to go down quietly. But this isn't just about the company anymore. This is about everything I've built and everything we've worked for." He stood up, pacing across the room. "I've always thought I could fight alone. But this time, Emma, I need your help. We can't let Holloway win. Not now." Emma stood and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. We've already made it this far. But we need to act now. If we don't, Holloway will tear down everything we've built. Then that includes us." Ethan turned to face her, his eyes intense. "What do you suggest?" Emma took a deep breath. "We have to be smarter than him. We need to hit him where it hurts his reputation, his power, and his ties to the people who are still loyal to him. We go public. We expose the truth about his past dealings. We show everyone the kind of man he really is." Ethan nodded slowly, his face still filled with determination. "We do it carefully. If we expose him too soon, we'll risk everything. But if we let him continue his attack, it's over for both of us. We can't let him take back control. Not now." The following week, Emma and Ethan worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering information and setting up a strategy to counter Holloway's next move. They knew that the battle ahead wouldn't just be about business. It would be a war for the future of Carter Enterprises and everything they had fought to rebuild. The night before their next board meeting, Emma sat in her office, staring at the documents spread out in front of her. She was exhausted, her eyes bloodshot from the long hours, but she couldn't stop now. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let Holloway win. She wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. She was fighting for the life she had started to build with Ethan. When Ethan knocked on her door, she looked up, offering him a small smile. Ready for tomorrow. He stepped inside, his gaze softening when he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "We're ready. We just need to make sure we stay one step ahead of Holloway. We can't afford to slip up now." "I know," Emma replied, standing up and walking over to him. "But we're not just fighting for Carter Enterprises anymore. We're fighting for something bigger, something that can't be torn apart. We're doing this together." Ethan smiled, his usual confidence returning. "Together," he repeated, his hand finding hers. Then let's make sure Holloway never sees it coming. The next day, Carter Enterprises board meeting was more intense than ever. Holloway had called for a vote to oust Ethan from the company once and for all, and the tension in the room was thick with anticipation. Emma sat next to Ethan, her heart racing as she prepared for the final confrontation. As the meeting began, Richard Holloway stood and addressed the room, his tone filled with venom. "Gentlemen and ladies of the board, it's time we put an end to this charade. Ethan Carter is not fit to lead this company. His lack of vision, his betrayal of the values this company was built on, he has proven that. He is a danger to the future of Carter Enterprises." Ethan stood up, his calm demeanor belying the storm brewing inside him. "I've made mistakes, but I've also worked harder than anyone here to fix them. And if you want to see the future of Carter Enterprises, you'll stand with me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance." The room was silent, the tension thick as the board members looked at each other, torn between loyalty to the company and loyalty to Holloway. Then, one by one, the votes were cast. The final vote came down to a few key members, and just when it seemed that Holloway's plan was about to succeed, the unexpected happened. A majority of the board sided with Ethan, voting to keep him in power and reject Holloway's motion. Holloway's face turned pale with rage as he stormed out of the room. But Ethan stood firm, his eyes never leaving Emma's. After the final showdown in the boardroom, things in Carter Enterprises began to settle down. Ethan Carter had managed to secure his position as the leader of the company, and with the support of his loyal board members and employees, the company was starting to rebuild. The old guard had been silenced, and the culture of manipulation and secrecy was being replaced with transparency, honesty, and a shared vision for the future. Emma stood at the balcony of her office, overlooking the city skyline, feeling a rare sense of peace wash over her. The past few months had been a whirlwind, filled with betrayals, hard decisions, and unexpected twists. Yet, here they were still standing, still fighting. She turned and saw Ethan walking toward her. His face was no longer the cold, calculating CEO she had first met. He was different, now vulnerable, open, and, in a way, more human than he had ever been, you know. "I think we might actually make it," she said with a smile. Her voice light, but there was a deep sense of satisfaction in her words. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think Carter Enterprises is finally on the right track." Ethan stepped closer, his hands in his pockets, looking at her with a soft smile. "You were right from the beginning, Emma. It wasn't just about changing the company, it was about changing me." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I didn't expect you to be so humble," Ethan chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't expect it either, but here we are." They both stood there for a moment, the weight of everything they had been through settling into the space between them. Despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayals, they had made it through. And now it felt like the world was finally giving them a chance to start fresh. Later that evening, they sat together in a small, quiet restaurant in Georgetown, far away from the corporate chaos of Carter Enterprises. They had chosen this place for its intimacy and the promise of a quiet night, just the two of them. The city around them was still, the hum of traffic barely reaching their ears. "So," Emma said, breaking the silence, "what happens next? Where do we go from here?" Ethan took a deep breath, looking at her with that same determined gaze he had once shown when making tough business decisions. But this time, there was no coldness, just clarity. From here, we keep moving forward. Together, he said. I know there will still be challenges, but I'm not going to face them alone anymore. We have a chance to build something real both with the company and between us. Emma smiled, her heart fluttering at his words. She had always known he was capable of change, but hearing him say it with such sincerity made her believe in the possibility of a new beginning. I'm ready for that, she said softly, but this time no secrets. No more games. None, Ethan promised. I'll prove it to you every day. I don't want to just be a better CEO. Emma, I want to be a better man for you. As they enjoyed their dinner, talking about their plans for the future, the world outside seemed to fade away. There was a quiet calm that surrounded them, a sense of peace that neither of them had felt in a long time. For the first time, they weren't just business partners, they were something more. And the future, though uncertain, felt full of possibilities. The next few weeks were a blur of change. Carter Enterprises officially announced the new direction for the company, one focused on integrity, community, and transparency. Emma and Ethan worked tirelessly to ensure the transition went smoothly, handling everything from restructuring to internal communications. They held countless meetings with employees, offering them a stake in the company's future and creating a culture of accountability and trust. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, and old habits died hard. But as time passed, it became clear that Carter Enterprises was becoming something new, something stronger. The employees were more engaged, and the board members were finally on board with the changes. Ethan had also started stepping back into his leadership role, no longer as the power-hungry CEO he once was, but as a man who had learned the hard way about what truly mattered. He still led the company, but he no longer sought to control everything. He trusted Emma, and he trusted his team, and that trust made all the difference. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of Emma's apartment, looking out over the city, Ethan took her hand, pulling her close. I don't think I've ever been this content in my life, he said, his voice full of emotion. Emma smiled, leaning into him. Me neither, but I think we've earned this. We've fought for it. We have, Ethan agreed, kissing the top of her head. And I'll never stop fighting for you, for the company, for everything we've built. They stood in the quiet of the night, the city lights sparkling below them, feeling the weight of the journey they had been through. It had been a long road full of lies, struggles, and heartache, but they had made it. Together, and for the first time in a long time, Emma truly believed that this was just the beginning.